How do you feel about your friendships? Are you surrounded by people who get you and support you? How often are you feeling lonely or isolated? Would you like to have more friends or spend more quality time and energy with the ones you already have? Are your friendships sustaining and uplifting you, or are they more a force of habit that could use a bit of an upgrade? Hi, this is Sara. I'm a relationship coach, dancer, and Taoist. In every episode, I'll be exploring psychedelics, well-being, or the human experience, and this one is on how to create community. I'm a relationship anarchist, and part of what that means is I don't make sex the most important part of my relationships. So what I mean by that is the person I'm having sex with doesn't automatically have priority, the primary spot in the hierarchy, and everybody else is secondary to whoever I'm having sex with. Now, the people that I'm having sex with are really important to me, and that's not to devalue my relationship with them at all, but it's just to create more of this sense of there's not this automatic default assumption that all of my free time and energy goes to the person I'm having sex with. They have veto power over the decisions in my life. I like to really make sure that I'm cultivating a wide variety of relationships in order to get all of my needs met. So that means I'm not relying on my lover to be my everything for me. I'm really diversifying my portfolio so that I'm making sure I'm getting my needs met across multiple relationships in a variety of ways that feels really satisfying and sustainable to me. So when I have an unmet need, like for instance, I need more quality time, or I want to share an interest with somebody or get more emotional engagement or have a quality conversation, I'm not relying on just one person to get those things. I have lots of people that I can go to so that I'm not experiencing such a sense of scarcity. When, for instance, one person isn't available, there's somebody else that I can go to in order to get that need met in some way. And I built this very intentionally. This didn't happen organically, spontaneously, without any intention. I did it with effort, and I did it with a lot of cooperation and conversation. So what I did was I invited some of my closest friends out to dinner. And I said, look, y'all, I want to have a conversation with you about our relationships with each other, because clearly we love each other. Clearly we're connected and committed to each other. And yet we're not seeing each other that much. We're not in each other's day-to-day lives. We're kind of just checking in with each other when there's like a spare moment that makes itself available. And it was feeling a little casual for the amount of love and care I was feeling for and from these people. And so I asked them, I said, hey, would you actually be willing to put more intentionality, more commitment into curating these relationships so that they're actually more reflective of the way that we genuinely feel about each other? And they were in. And so, we started having some deeper conversations about how could we do that? What would that look like? And part of the model that I used was from the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective. There's an exercise they have around pods and pod mapping. And I got this from Mia Mingus. And one of the things that they talk about is the fact that we need multiple pods of people in our life. So multiple people who are fulfilling different roles for us. And two of the pods that I wanted to create was one for accountability and one for support. So the support one is obvious, right? Like these are the people that you can call when you're having a hard day, when you need a shoulder to cry on, when you need that kind of support in your life in order to get you through the hard times. And obviously friendships, that's one of the functions that they serve, right? But being able to be really specific about what support looked like for me. So rather than assuming it was going to be lengthy phone conversations, like it might just be a hug or it might be a brief text, but being able to get really clear on what kind of support I needed, being able to ask for that directly from this inner circle of friends that I had and being like, hey, this is what I need. And getting consent from them. Are you actually available to offer that? How often do you feel like you'd be able to offer that? Getting really clear on what their time and energy commitments were in order to support me. So for instance, one of my friends tended to be one of my go-to friends when I was having trouble in my relationships. And at one point they said to me like, hey, look, I'm hearing about this a lot. And I feel like you need more people in your life to talk to about this, like needed to like disperse the load a little bit, which made a lot of sense to me. If like they were always the one that was holding my heaviness, that were holding my tears, like that's a lot for one friend. And so being able to get multiple people in my support so that if one person wasn't available or they were busy with their own stuff, their own heartbreak, their own grief, their own work commitments, their own family commitments, I wouldn't just be left in the lurch and I would have other people that I could go to that could support me. Now, the second one is the accountability pod. And this is when I was being an asshole and I needed somebody to call me out in a kind and loving way. So for instance, accountability can be like, hey, I have this goal and I want to show up for it. And then you can like check in with somebody and they can be like, hey, you said you wanted to do this goal. Have you made any progress on it? It can be accountability like that. But notice this is very much not like the chasing you with the stick, like, hey, you said you were going to do this. You have to do this kind of persecutorial energy. It's more of just like this check-in buddy. But also when I'm showing up in a way that isn't in alignment with my values, there's somebody that I trust who can like call me out. Or rather call me in. I love call in versus call outs when that's available. So for instance, again, I was in a conflict with somebody and I move very fast and I'm very articulate. So you can imagine the nasty text that I can send off in a hurry. And I'm really working on that kind of impulse control. That's an ongoing journey for sure for all of us. But I happened to be with one of my accountability friends when I wanted to send off this text. I'm like, I just really want to tell them how I'm feeling. And she turned to me and she's like, you told me that when you are feeling like you need to send a text urgently, that you actually want to wait for 20 minutes, check in and see if you still want to send that text. And she was like, I'm not telling you that you can't send that text. I'm just reminding you that you told me you wanted to wait before you sent it. And that was a brilliant move of friendship. I'm forever grateful to that person. You know who you are. So really, really appreciative that that person in that moment, rather than shaming me in any way, rather than making me feel bad about myself, was just like, hey, this is who you told me you want to be. This is a moment when you can actually practice being who you're saying you want to be. And I'm just reminding you of who that is. So you can check that out, Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, figure out who your support people are, figure out who your accountability people are. And I had to move my people around a little bit. So I had a couple people in mind for who would be my accountability people. And then I did something that I'm not super proud of. I don't even remember what it was at this moment. But I remember I went to some of the accountability people and I was like, hey, I did this thing. And one of them was like, I totally understand why you did that. And it makes so much sense. And if I were you, I'd do that too. And I was like, whoa, nope, you can't be in the accountability pod, but you would be amazing in the support pod. So I bumped them over knowing that they would absolutely have my back anytime I needed support. So again, there's some romanticism in the culture that these kinds of friendships, these deep, connected, people get you, people give you exactly what you want. There's all this flow, there's all the synchronicity that's going to happen organically, spontaneously. Like maybe sometimes, maybe to a certain depth, but how deep do you want to go in your friendships? If you want to do that deep dive, there's probably going to need to be some commitment and intentionality to it. So you can't just wish for it, you have to work for it a little bit. And part of the reason that we have to work for it is because we live in a culture that separates us, that isolates us. We live in separate housing. Most of us aren't doing communal living. Those of you that are doing it, it's the dream, although I realize it comes with its own complications for sure. But most of us live in separate houses. We drive separate vehicles, although yeah, like some of us are using public transportation, but how friendly are you being with the people on the bus? Let's get real. So most of us are like, moving around in our separate vehicles. And then on top of that, our lives are incredibly stressful and we don't have a bunch of time left over for cultivating our friendships. We also don't have super easy access to community. Now, once upon a time, it was more culturally normative to have gathering places for community. But these tended to be institutions. So for instance, I'm going to say like a church or a social club. And those gathering places still exist, but we have this lens now, especially in this kind of leftist culture, where institutions can be problematic for people, where they can be hierarchical or they can be isolating to certain individuals, where they're as much of a community as they're offering, they're also keeping people out. And so, yes, those are gathering places for community, but some people have been turned off by those being the main focus of where they build community. And so we're left with kind of this vacuum of where to create friendships, right? Like if you think about those of us that went to college, if you went to college, it was so easy to make friends. And then how the hell do you do it once you're not in school with people anymore? Like, how do you make friends if you're not doing it in an academic institution? Well, the way that most of us do that is through coupleism. We pair up with somebody and they become our go-to person. They become our everything. They become our friend. They become our lover. They're the person that we're living with. We start sharing everything with them. And part of sharing everything with them is then we're building a nuclear family. This is you have your spouse and the 2.5 kids in the house with the picket fence. Again, very isolated versus like living in an intergenerational situation where grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and cousins are all around. It's more of this like you and your partner and your kids are living in your separate house. Then even within that family structure, we have all of these limitations around who quote unquote counts as family. So I'll never forget, I went to a party one time and I went with my brother, and my brother is 16 years younger than I am. So there's already like this age discrepancy that people are really aware of most of the time when we're out together. But we were out at a party and somebody who did not know me well started asking a bunch of questions about me and my bro. Okay, fine. So I'm answering them. And eventually they got around to the question that they really wanted to ask was, did we have the same father? And this was important to this person for reasons, that feel pretty status quo to me, kind of gross. But so after I answered the question, which was kind of none of their business, but whatever, I answered it anyway, they exclaimed, "Oh, so he's your half brother." And I looked at them and I was like, I don't think about it that way. Like, he's my brother. Like, yeah, I guess technically by whatever that standard is, like, yeah, he's my half brother because we have different dads, but he's like blood of my blood. He is my person. He's the one I would take a bullet for. What do you mean half? There ain't no half about this between me and him. So how we define family in the culture also makes us feel a little bit more isolated. It creates, again, kind of this hierarchy. And then that hierarchy creates this less than or this scarcity. And I feel a lot of that is unnecessary. So we have the coupleism, we have the person that we're sleeping with, and then we have the nuclear family that we're building with that person. And then what else do we spend most of our time and energy on? Work. Work is a huge priority for most of us. It gets a tremendous amount of our energy. And so then what's left over for friends? Not a whole lot. And it seems like, work can be stressful. Raising a family can be stressful. We can get into these complicated dynamics with our partners, our romantic partners, our sexual partners. You'd think friends would be pretty critical in all of this to help us get through, to help us manage, again, to sustain us and uplift us. But because we live in this consumerist capitalistic culture, instead what we do is we go, you know what, instead of prioritizing my friends, I think I'm just going to buy something and try to make myself feel better through buying services, buying goods, instead of actually taking time and energy to cultivate relationships, which would nourish us on this deeper level. Community is one of our biggest sources of power. When somebody comes to me and they're struggling and they want my help, one of the first things that I'm checking in with them about is whether or not they have enough support in their lives. How many people could they call in the middle of the night if they needed a ride to the hospital, no questions asked? And if people are giving me really low numbers for that, then one of the first things I'm going to do is actually try to build up their sense of community, because that's going to be a tremendous source of power. It's going to resource them tremendously. And so I really want to offer you resources for how to build up your community. Okay, so one way that we can build up our community is that actually requires a deep commitment to each other. We have to show up consistently. We have to be clear about what we want and need, and we have to be clear about what we can and cannot offer. So I want you to think about your friendships the same way you think about your romantic partners, your sexual partners, as serious long-term commitments. Now, this gets a little tricky because of the competition that's embedded with some of the gender training in our lives. So what I mean by this is, if you're a woman and you've ever walked into a room and you've scanned the room to see who's the prettiest person in the room, you're already walking in with a lens for competition, that you are somehow competing with other people in the room, rather than walking in and going, where's the camaraderie? Where's the friendship here? And it's the same thing, like the gender training for men tends to be more protector provider based. And this is more like if you're comparing your paycheck to somebody else, or the level of fame that you have, this idea of like, can you actually provide financially in some way for the people in your lives? So we tend to compare ourselves to people so we can see where we fall in the competition hierarchy with people, rather than going in with this idea of socializing, creating friendships. Maybe this person can actually teach me how to get to where they are, or maybe even if you don't necessarily like the package of somebody you're in competition with, there's probably some piece of what they're doing that you'd really like. And what would it be like if we could actually collaborate with each other rather than compete with each other? And again, I'm not trying to dip into idealism, because competition is real and scarcity is real. But the fact that we're going in with this negativity lens, this bias already, that like people are out to get us and we have to like step all over people in order to get what we want, really limits our ability to create friendships. And so I want to create this idea of potentially shifting from competition into connection as much as possible. All right. But now that you're trying to find friends, like how do we do that? Where do you do that? It's really helpful to know what you deeply care about, to be clear on what your interests are, and then find people who have those common interests or are sharing the work that you do in the world in some way. So for instance, for me, I'm a dancer. Me walking into a dance class, there are going to be a ton of people there who already in some way see the world or experience the world in a way that's similar to me. So there's already going to be a little bit of a connection there, right? So if you need to join a book club, if you need to organize protests, like whatever it is, being able to find people who are also organizing around the things that you deeply care about, which means you have to know what those things are to begin with. So what is it that you love? What is it that you care about? What is it that you like to spend time on? And then put yourself in places where other people are also valuing those things. Then once you've found a community who shares your interest or shares your values or the work that you're creating in the world in some way, check in with them. Is there going to be mutuality? Are they also looking for a friendship? So just because you want to be friends with somebody doesn't mean that they have the time, energy, or interest to be friends with you. So we want there to be some kind of mutual interest in this. And they also have to have the time and energy in order to cultivate a relationship with you. And you have to have the time and energy that you can extend towards them as well. Because again, this requires commitment. Now, within our friendships, we need to be vulnerable, and we also need to be open to criticism. So just like in romantic relationships, we have this Cinderella idealism that we're going to find the one who's going to love us exactly as we are. We're not going to have to change a damn thing. We can just be completely ourselves. This kind of like, if you can't accept me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best kind of idealism in the culture. And I'm calling bullshit. Conditional love is valid love. So yes, people can offer us unconditional love because we're human beings and we deserve respect and we deserve belonging and all of that. But also people having conditions, having a minimum standard, wanting to have common values, wanting to have similar worldviews. It's absolutely valid. And so you need to be open to criticism. Like in the same way that, if you were with a romantic partner, like, hey, this really doesn't work for me. I want your friends to be able to do that with you as well. I want them to be able to say, hey, like, by the way, I need more of this from you, or a little bit less of that would feel good for me. So really being able to be vulnerable enough to be open to criticism with your friends. And the last thing, and this is really important, y'all, is we all want to feel a sense of belonging. We want to walk around and feel like we're wanted. And what most of us are doing is we're waiting for somebody else to offer that to us. We want somebody to see us in all our brightness, all our shininess, and come over and go, I saw you from across the room. And I just know in my heart of hearts, I want you to be my best friend. But if all of us are walking around waiting for somebody else to offer that to us, then who's actually giving that out? And so I want you to be the person who extends that to other people. So if you're in a space, so again, for instance, I'm thinking about my dance community. I've been there for over a decade. Like I know that place inside and out. So when somebody new walks through that door, if I offer them kindness, if I offer them help with the choreography, if I extend belonging in some way, I'm already working towards creating a new friendship in that moment, because we all want that belonging, and offering it to somebody else is often how you will end up receiving a very deep, lasting friendship. I'm going to end with a quote from Becky Jenkins, who talks about love and commitment. And she's talking about different kinds of love and commitments, but I'm going to focus on this one concerning friendships specifically. One is the commitment that comes out of an agreement to take the relationship seriously and to struggle for its maintenance, even in bad times. That's the sort of commitment that's the definition of friendship, which is that people decide they like each other, have time for each other, and want to take on the commitment of friendship to hang in there. It's the same kind of commitment people make when they get married, to hang in there, not to dismiss it lightly. I hope you have so much support in your life. And if you don't, I hope this was helpful in giving you some ideas for how to create a stronger community that would be satisfying for you. If you want to find out more information, you can find me on Instagram at Be The Radical Way, and go to trendswithbenefits.com to check out all of our written work on psychedelics, well-being, and the human experience.